Experienced Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with my admissions colleague, Merav Frazier. Merav is the Senior Associate Director of Global Recruitment here at the Darden School of Business, and she and I recently connected to talk more about the waitlist process for the full-time MBA program here at Darden. In this episode, we talk with Merav about what the waitlist decision is, the waitlist timeline, potential next steps for waitlisted candidates, and more. If you're planning to submit an application for Darden's full-time MBA program, I think you're going to find this conversation really helpful. As always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the Experienced Darden podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. Now, without further ado, here's my conversation with my admissions colleague, Merav Frazier. Rob, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. Am I your first one of the new year?
We've recorded a few episodes since the start of 2025.
To be the first. Okay, all right.
Well, listen, I've been looking forward to this conversation. I'm excited to have you here on the podcast. The podcast, we're always interviewing, always working, never sleeping.
True. Yeah, well, I'm excited to be here.
How is your 2025 going?
So far, so good. Excited to start round 2 and reading some great applications so far. So it's really excited to see how the round goes.
Yeah, talk about always working, never sleeping. Admissions, it's always something.
Yeah, there's always something, whether it's reading applications, interviewing, Darden days, then we roll right into future year scholars. There's always something fun happening.
Well, I appreciate you taking time for this conversation. I think this conversation is going to be really helpful to candidates out there. We're going to specifically talk about the waitlist decision, the waitlist process. Know that there's a lot of information out on the internet. People can read and read it in all these different forms. I'm not sure how helpful that is to people. Probably better to hear directly from you, Merav, about how this works at Darden. So I'm excited about this conversation. Thank you for making time.
Yeah, thank you. And you're right. There's a lot of content out there, especially about the waitlist, and they're trying to reduce anxiety, but hearing it straight from us, I think, can be most helpful.
All right. So before we get too much in the nitty gritty of the waitlist process and how it works and next steps and all this kind of stuff, let's just talk about what a waitlist decision is. So what is the waitlist decision here?
Yeah. So basically, a waitlist decision means that the admissions committee sees potential in your candidacy, but in general, other candidates have presented a more compelling profile. So the waitlist is really an opportunity for candidates to send additional updates and create a more compelling case for themselves.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for us to continue to get to know a candidate, for a candidate to continue to strengthen their candidacy and really sort of think about, is Darden a school of choice for you? Is it really a place you'd like to be? I think that's probably maybe one of the most important things for people to think about as they consider how they like to navigate the waitlist process.
Yeah.
All right. So a candidate gets the waitlist decision to have been waitlisted. Probably not the decision they're hoping for. It's not a yes, but it's also not a no. As you mentioned, it's this kind of in between decision. Darden is still potentially an option for them down the road, but kind of have to see how things play out here. So what's next for a candidate on the waitlist?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Look at the positive. It's still an opportunity because it's not a denial. So really the first step is to accept your offer on the wait list. And some people do miss this step initially, but you do have to accept your offer to remain on the wait list. And you get the opportunity to schedule a call with an admission officer. There is a calendar invite that you'll receive once you've accepted your offer to stay on the wait list. Then the next step is honestly just to do some self-reflection prior to that call. Thinking about your application objectively. What are some areas that you think you could strengthen? Does your academic profile meet our averages? Have you clearly explained your career progression and goals? And how did your interview go, right? These are just some areas to think about, even prior to that call. Then once you have your waitlist call, the admission officer typically explains the process and provides you kind of general guidance about strengthening your profile. So keep in mind, this advice is very case by case, and often it's not as simple as retesting or taking a quant class or providing professional updates. Sometimes it's just a matter of sending whatever updates you have and waiting. There isn't anything you did wrong. It's just that, as I kind of noted earlier, Others presented a more compelling profile overall. We just have to wait and see how the pool shapes out. Now, the admission officer will provide a date for sending updates, right? So we want to make sure we have enough time to review them in the next round. So make sure that you send all of your updates via the waitlist update form that's in the portal. And this form will be updated in your portal after the call. So some people start looking for ways of sending materials ahead of time. The appropriate thing to do is just to wait till after your call and use that waitlist update form. And then the last step is probably the hardest part, just waiting. I think being on the wait list requires kind of, just that patience and flexibility, and it just takes time for the admissions committee to review materials. So I know that's the hardest part, but it's probably the most important step. It's called a wait list for a reason. And so waiting is a huge aspect of it.
So as I hear you share that, it sounds like, if I understand correctly, candidates who are on the wait list, they're going to be reviewed as the admissions committee goes from round to round. That's the reason for the deadline that you mentioned. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. So the admissions committee will continue to review the application with the next round, taking into consideration any updates that the candidate submits. So if you were early action, then you'd be considered again in round one. If you were waitlisted in round one, you'd be considered again in round two. And we kind of move applications along. So it's possible for an early action candidate to not hear back until round two or round three or later, as we see how the pool shapes out and look to close our class.
And I was just curious, you mentioned that waiting is part of this. Why is it the case that this takes a while to play out? People don't get an answer immediately, even if they've taken X, Y, or Z steps. Why does it take a while?
Because it really is a thoughtful process. The admissions committee reads applications holistically. It's not just a matter of, strengthening your GPA with additional, or not necessarily your GPA, but like strengthening your academic profile with additional coursework or a stronger test score. It's not necessarily a matter of just showing more interest. It's really a holistic review of your profile in comparison to all of the other candidates that we have in the pool. And so it takes us a while to make that assessment.
Yeah, I always feel like with the waitlist process, you need to get a picture of the pool, but also how the class is coming together. That is also some of these. It's in process, right? It's something that's taking shape as we go from round to round. It sort of naturally kind of brings us to this question about what does the timeline look like for candidates on the waiting list?
Yeah. So the timeline is very similar, I will say, for domestic and international candidates, and I'll make a distinction later. But basically, like I mentioned before, we continue to evaluate both with the next round. And if we have opportunities to offer in the next round, then we do so with that round's decision release date. So, for example, some candidates that were waitlisted in early action or round one may hear back as early as the round two decision release date, which is going to be about mid-March or so for this cycle. Technically, the wait list remains open until July, or until we've kind of closed or filled out and closed our class. But the distinction here with international students is that we try to let them know no later than mid-May, given the need to have the time for the application for the student visa, right? So international students have an extra step they need to take prior to matriculating at Darden, and we want to give them as much time as we can. So while technically the waitlist does remain open until July, for international students, we do make an effort to let you all know by mid-May at the latest, so that hopefully you have enough time to accept the offer of admission and apply for that student visa and be in Charlottesville in July, typically end of July, for the International Student Orientation Program.
As I hear you describe that timeline, it can be a pretty extended one. You think about someone who applied in round one, that's October, decision would come out in December. And then the whole process could stretch until July. I think it's important for people to sort of embrace what that means. There's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of like sort of emotions to manage through that process. But it's nice though that they have an admissions team member there to be a point of contact to help them as they go through this process.
Yeah, it is an extended timeline. And so it's always important to also not close any other doors for yourself. While we love to see that you are interested and invested in coming to Darden, it's not a guarantee when you're on the wait list. So make sure to have backup options as well, as you're going through the process to make it less stressful for you towards the end, if it doesn't work out, especially.
Yeah, I think and one of the reasons why I always mention it's worth thinking about how interested someone is in Darden as they go through this process is I think that's a really fundamental question. As you're going through the waitlist process, is Darden really a school of choice for you? Is it where you'd like to be? If it is, then I think that sort of kind of shifts how you might think about the waitlist process versus if Darden is just like one of several schools you applied to.
Yes, I agree. But again, it's always good to have a backup option just in case.
So one of the things that you've mentioned here is, okay, as part of the conversations you might talk about how you'd want to strengthen your candidacy, how you'd want to stay engaged with the admissions team, and acknowledging this sort of extended timeline, and this could take a while. What are some ways that someone can meaningfully engage with our team? And as I've heard you talk about this before, it sounds like quality is more important than quantity here.
Yes, meaningful engagement, quality versus quantity, right? So it's not a matter of signing up for every event you can get your hands on, but it's having those meaningful interactions. So really the first step for engagement is to follow the instructions of the admissions committee, right? So whoever you spoke with during your waitlist conversation, follow their feedback, follow their instructions. If they ask for something specific, make sure to send it through the portal however they instructed you to do so by the date that they gave you. That's super important. Another way of showing interest and engagement is to include a letter of continued interest. And this can be sent along with any other updates that you've sent. So this letter can really just include more details about why you're interested in Darden and more importantly, how you hope to contribute to the Darden community. I always think that's a nice addition to see how students see themselves here. And it helps us get to know you a little bit better throughout the process, especially if maybe you don't think your personality shined as much during the interview, for example. Now, you are welcome to attend events for prospective students, right? We always invite all students to attend events. Just know that they're more for your benefit as a prospective student rather than our benefit. We're not tracking, we're not using these events as an engagement tracking tool, especially for waitlisted candidates. So it's really, they are opportunities that are there for you to get to know Darden a little bit better. I always suggest too for waitlisted candidates to connect with current students and alumni. That's another great way to get to know the program better and see how, or find out ways that you can see yourself here, right? If you want to include that information in the personal statement. Now, I'll note candidates should really avoid over communication, right? Such as contacting us too frequently or sending multiple letters of continued interest. This can be seen as a little pushy and just really not necessary. If we have an update to share with you as a candidate, you will hear from us, right? Like we're not going to hide any information about your decision. If we have an update to share, we'll tell you. So I typically advise candidates that no news means just that. No news. If you haven't been denied admission, then you're still being considered on the wait list, and we'll let you know if that changes. So no news is no news.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things for candidates, right? So you've got this decision. It's not a yes. It's also not a no. It's a little bit of an in-between decision, and you're dealing with this extended timeline. There's not a lot of updates to share because it can be a slow process, and you sort of trying to come to grips with all of this stuff. I think it can be hard to sort of manage your energy as you go through this, right? A lot of times when I've talked to people on the wait list, Marav, and I wonder if this is your experience, people want to try to affect an immediate change for themselves. What can I do right now? And you see a lot of engagement maybe for a couple weeks or so, and then that flags and things kind of drop off. I always encourage folks to think about how they can develop an approach that feels sustainable to them and also sort of balanced, measured To your point, you can overdo it here, and that's something to be mindful of.
Yeah. Spread the love, right? Don't pour it all into the first few weeks and then taper off towards the end. You're absolutely right. People do look for the immediate, what can I do now? Is there anything else? What is really specific and tangible that I can do or fix? Or what's that secret formula or secret sauce? And unfortunately, it doesn't exist, right? And in very few cases, if any at all, honestly, it's a matter of just retesting or something that simple. Usually it's just more complex because we evaluate candidates holistically and want to see how you fit into the overall class. And so it's really a matter of showing interest, but within moderation. And if you have questions, please email. That's what we're here for. We're here to address questions, but emailing every week or so and saying, what's the update? What's the update? Unfortunately, we're just not going to be able to give you an update unless, we have one, which, like I said before, if we had an update to share, we would do so directly.
Yeah, I think the thing to remember if you're an applicant in this situation is that from the admissions perspective, right? So we have a waitlist process every year. We have waitlist activity every year, meaning candidates being admitted off the waiting list into the class. That happens every year. The timing varies because, well, the context is different every year, right? How the pool comes together, the strength of the pool, how the class comes together, how you're thinking about shaping your class given the group of people who've deposited. All these things bear upon the waitlist. And they're all things as admissions committee we're learning about as we go through the cycle. So this information is also kind of coming together for us. And that's a lot of what ultimately will shape the waitlist process.
Yeah, I think the number one question I get is, what are my chances? Right? Predict the odds for me. And it's hard. The waitlist is very unpredictable, as you just noted. Like we have to take into consideration many factors, increase in applications, quality changes year to year, right? So all these factors have come into play. And some years we take a lot off the wait list, and sometimes, we don't take as many from the wait list, but it varies depending on context. So it's hard to predict the odds of a candidate, and it's also very case by case as well. And so, yeah, it's the toughest question I get, and I wish I had an answer for it, but we just can't predict the odds.
Well, one of the things that we talk about in some of our application workshops and just application hotline webinars and things like this is, as an applicant, it's important to focus on what you can control in the process and put your energy towards those things. So, once you get a decision, so you're on the wait list, well, you can't make something happen necessarily, but you can choose how to approach that process, how you engage with the team, how you look to strengthen your application, how you react to the feedback. All of those things are well within your control. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, particularly as you're going through this process, which does have a fair amount of ambiguity to it.
Yeah. And approaching the process with positive intent and positivity and optimism is helpful. I think that's the best way because, like I said before, the waitlist is still an opportunity. And, we hope to be able to make a lot of waitlist offers. It's not always the case, but we also approach the reading process looking to make cases for candidates. We always read in the positive, trying to make a case for a candidate. And so that's how I recommend to folks to approach the waitlist process as well.
Well, that kind of brings us to the next phase of this conversation is, how do we evaluate waitlisted candidates? If we are in a position where we're going to be taking someone or some ones off the wait list, how do we evaluate these candidates?
Yeah. So waitlisted candidates are reviewed holistically, taken into consideration their updates, but within the context of the next round. So sometimes candidates present a more compelling profile at the time of that the admissions committee can offer them admission, like in the second round. So maybe for some reason you didn't look as compelling in round one against the context of that pool, but now in round two, with the additional updates, the candidacy looks a little bit stronger. And because we've reread your entire profile, taking into consideration any academic updates, any professional updates, or any personal updates, such as that personal statement, into consideration. So perhaps at that time, we can make an offer, but it's just as holistic as the initial review process, which is also why it takes us a lot of time to read them.
Yeah, one of the things I always share with candidates, and this is important for people to keep in mind, it's not really a ranked list of anybody. There's nobody at the top, nobody at the bottom. If you're in a position as the admissions committee, if you're thinking about, all right, we might have some waitlist activity here, we may want to take someone or a couple people off the wait list. You're thinking about your class, who's in the class, the mix of people there. You can be a little bit more surgical in the waitlist process in terms of how you're rounding out the class than you might be when you're just admitting folks and say, round one or round two, so one of these other deadlines. At least that's how I think about it, Merav. I don't know how that compares.
Yeah, I think that's the second most asked question is, do you rank the wait list? Where do I fall on the wait list? And the truth is we don't rank the wait list. We just go back through and reevaluate all of the candidates that we have on the wait list within the context of the next round. And so I'll note this too, though, we do offer waitlist opportunities to several candidates who don't elect to remain on the wait list. So that pool does get smaller. And some candidates don't elect to have a conversation. They don't elect to send updates. So the pool gets smaller. But all the applicants get a reevaluation within the context of the next round.
Yeah, one of the things that I always encourage candidates to think about is as we are going to have some waitlist activity, one of the things that we might think about then sort of next is who's remained engaged with us, who has continued to demonstrate their interest, who's taken steps to strengthen their candidacy. So if you're wondering, does this stuff matter that we've been talking about here? Absolutely, right? It's not a ranked list, but if we're going to have some waitlist activity, we are going to think about who's taken these steps, who's taken the feedback, who's stayed engaged. All that does matter.
Yeah. Who's had thoughtful interactions with us? Sometimes, it's how the waitlist admission officer, when you chat with them, the impression that you give them about just your genuine interest in the program as well, that comes into play, and how engaged you are in that conversation and any thoughtful questions, which goes back to that reflection piece prior to the conversation, is important so that you can engage meaningfully during that conversation with your waitlist officer.
Well, Merav, we talked about waitlist activity and people being admitted into the class from the waitlist. And yes, that happens. The amount of waitlist activity varies from year to year, but sometimes we get to the end of the cycle, late July, and realize that we're going to close the class and there's going to be no more offers of admission. And some folks are still on the waitlist. What if, I applied one cycle, I got waitlisted, and I remain interested in Darden? What are my options at this point?
Yeah, so I love seeing reapplicants, and if a candidate is still interested in attending Darden and they elect to not attend another program that fall, they can reapply in the next admission cycle. And so we do ask that you take some time and reflect on your previous application, make sure to update any changes when completing the new application. And there is a specific section on the application for reapplicants that allows for you to say when you applied last and what's new since you last applied. And now we do have an opportunity or the ability to clone documents like transcripts and whatnot, so they don't have to be resubmitted. But we do like to see new letters of recommendation and also updated responses to your short answer questions as well.
Yeah, a number of students at Darden applied to Darden more than once. Reapplicants are valued members of our applicant pool, and I will say for some people, and I've had this conversation with a number of people on the podcast, they went through the application process once and they approached it in a certain way, and that was really informative to them. They realized some of the things they would do differently if they had an opportunity to do it over again, and the reapplication process gives them an opportunity. Applying again gives them an opportunity to maybe make some changes. What they did the first time, learn from it, incorporate that feedback, and approach it in a different way. So I just want to underscore that. I think sometimes when I talk to candidates who are asking about reapplying, they're worried that we might think negatively about having to reapply to Darden, but that is not the right way to think about it. We value reapplicants, absolutely.
Yeah, we definitely value reapplicants. And like I said, we really do read with positive intent for making a case. And a reapplicant shows us that genuine interest in being here. So if it's anything, it's bonus points, right? Like we do look favorably upon reapplicants.
Well, Merav, anything else you'd like to share as we wrap up this conversation?
I think that's about it. I don't have any other tips and tricks. Like I said, there is no secret sauce, and I understand that the waitlist is not the decision that folks were hoping for, and that it is really tough to wait. But be positive about the process and engage meaningfully with us. And as always, we'll see what happens.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks for your time, and hopefully for our listeners, there's a group of folks on our admissions committee who work closely with our waitlisted candidates, Merav included, and they really have such passion for that work. They love engaging with students. They understand kind of where you are in the process, and they're here to help and to be a resource for you. So, Merav, thank you so much for answering all these questions. I know this is going to be helpful to our prospective students and applicants.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
And that was my conversation with Merav Frazier, Senior Associate Director of Global Recruitment here at the Darden School of Business. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. You can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.